Ready. And action! 大家好，我是微信教授 Back again with more stories of the land. The Shasta land. Once a teeming civilization of Shasta Indians, now not so much. I was telling you how on this side, if you face this way, it's almost like deserty dry. And then if you turn this way, it's green and lush. The Banana Belt. Perfect place for the Shasta Indians and their civilization. Once bustling with life, the river itself full of salmon and trout and crayfish and let's say fresh water clam, you name it. And up there, I don't know if you could see it, Wakanuni Tuki Wookie Mount Shasta. And over here, sometimes we call it Face Mountain. I call it the Sleeping Giant. I don't know if you can see him very well because there's so many telephone poles and trees and stuff. But if you look, you might be able to see his forehead. And there's a mountain behind him, so you can't really see it that well, but you can see his eyebrow ridge, his nose, his lips, his beard, or his chin there, and then behind the trees, his beard. And then you turn this way, and you can see his little man boobie, his nipple sticking up. And you turn down this way, past the pump house, and there's a ponderosa, I guess that's his foot right there. And you can see that the mountains are still covered with snow. Again, this place is ideal because it's in the Banana Belt where the Shasta Indians lived. So, without me standing around yakking so much, I'm going to try to tell you a story or actually read from Elizabeth Cook Lynn. So let me set this camera down, or I should say iPad, set it down, and hopefully not drop it and break it. Ah, what is this? Oh, cool. Postcard. There we go. How's that look? It's dark, but you don't need to see a whole lot anyway, because it's just me reading from Liz Cook Lynn. Her story, which you probably can't see. Nope, can't see it. That's terrible. Oh, there we go. This camera is terrible. That Guy, Wolf Dancing by Elizabeth Cook Lynn. I'm only going to read a little bit. Remember what I told you before. I abhor teachers who sit around and read to students, but sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. They did a poll of Americans. Nowadays, most Americans don't read anymore. Isn't that terrible? But you're stuck with a Native American literature professor who loves to torture his students. Never mind, let's read. That Guy, Wolf Dancing, a novella by Elizabeth Cook Lynn. Chapter 1. I felt a fake intimacy and was reluctant and nervous as I pushed back the curtain to answer her call light. Even a little smack. Anything, she agonized. The woman's smoky voice deepened when I entered her lair, carrying fresh towels from the aid desk. Anything, anything, she wreathed and rubbed and wrinkled hands together and tried to touch me. I couldn't tell at first glance whether this dark figure was a man or a woman. The words weren't spoken harshly, nor was it a demanding voice. It was a voice filled with anguish that left an aftertaste. In the upstate part of this college town, located a mere couple hundred miles, Creek Indian Reservation, in this expensive shiny pursuit of status and material possessions that they just put people away and are not concerned with the implications of how to really care unless something puzzling happens. Then they want to know all the answers. In many ways, I understood the callousness of it all. It wasn't a stubbornly held view of myself that I was put on this planet to nurse the sick and infirm, so my emotional reluctance as a caretaker made me a little anxious and withdrawn. I was here strictly by happenstance, or chance. Some would even call it by accident. By the time I was getting to know this woman, she weighed less than 90 pounds and was said by friends in her set in a neighborhood isolated from the mere middle class or poor people to be suffering from exhaustion. I guess she had been here in this hospital with her wealthy lawyer husband, in attendance for years before I got a temp job here. Yet she would be in my memory for a long time. Not so much because she was unique, because she wasn't. She was like a lot of junkies I've known, only she had money and an endowment of sorts. I can't explain why her awful life, her devastated life, hardly expected or explainable, has been part of the memorabilia about a brief hospital legacy I carry around with me, but it has. Some things are just forgettable, unforgettable, etched forever, some kind of personal yet historical drama. The room was dark, plush, and seemed to me to be a place for vipers and tree roots and fog and the dead. She was grinning, and her face was skeletal and ugly. I was spooked the first time I caught a glimpse of her several days earlier, sitting up in bed, smoking a cigarette, held in an ivory holder, her eyes shining, her fingers brown and brittle. And I wondered then if a cure had been put on her because a curse had been put on her because she was a princess whose suffocating parents pampered her and left her with no imagination to survive her luxury. "No, Mrs. Larson," I said as gently as I could. "The nurses say it's not time yet." "Uh-huh," I wanted to say sarcastically. "Why do you suppose they sent me, the new guy, the flunky, when your light went on?" But then there was something about her that made me ashamed of myself, and I hated my rugged response to her terrible needs. I lifted her wrist and pointed to her $1,000 watch and said, "You've got another hour to wait yet, ma'am." And then I patted her hand and was momentarily horrified when she clung to me, and I had to take her hands away from my shoulders and put them beside her on the bed. "Are you Indian?" she rasped. She looked at me with terrible eyes, and I walked out of the room getting embarrassed. From then on, I did what I could to make her comfortable, careful not to let her see that I could be moved by her pain. Here, a male nurse aide, all spiffy and white in the longest white uniform, Sister Oli's confined for me in her 2-week training session, learning how to take temps and empty bedpans and change sheets. And I still don't want to be here, so I never say that I am anything except temporary. I had wanted to go to Minneapolis and get involved in Indian affairs when I left Crow Creek. I even told my Aunt Aurelia that's where I was headed. But then my uncle, Tony Big Pipe, shot himself in September of 1981, and right after his funeral, I left without telling anyone. From his Dakota tomb, he has never said a word to me. And so I have failed to take into account any of the possibilities told to us by all the whirlwinds of the prairie. And so I am here, temporarily. I'm stopping it there. If you want to read the rest of the story, buy the book or check it out at our library. Ta-da! That Guy Wolf Dancing by Liz Cook Lynn. Now, how are we doing on time? 10 minutes and 32 seconds. Oh, goody, I got just enough time to show you some tree stuff. Let me pick up these books. Oh, man, I'm covering up the camera with my big fat fingers. We're going to walk over back toward the land where my parents live, and I'm going to show you some trees. And hopefully I don't mess this up this time, as I often do. I don't know what take this is, probably take 13. Again, over here, dried up land, looks like a desert. Over here, lush green Indian village. A land of contrasts. A land of solitude after the Washichu came along and killed off all the Shasta Indians and herded the rest to Oklahoma. And I apologize again for shaking the camera. I'm going to walk faster. Here I go. I'm supposed to be driving up to Portland right now. And I'm fooling around telling stories. But such is the life of an English professor / anthropology professor, as you know. All right. Again, shaking the camera. Let's move faster. Boom, 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 boopity, boop, boop, boom. Oh, cool, doves. Again, teeming with life still. Maybe, after we are long passed away, the animals and plants and everything will retake the land. Okay, now I was telling you about these trees. I was telling you that a lot of these trees were planted by a crazy young 10-year-old Indian boy after moving here, and it's probably really white. You probably can't even see it. Let me come around. I hate it when it does that. Faster! Here we go. There it is. I was telling you about these trees. See, with the metal around them to keep the deer from nibbling them. You can see that there's some wonderful gauze wrapped around the tree to keep the deer from chewing it up too much, which they had been doing. And you know that the deer will kill trees, rubbing their antlers and nibbling the bark. And you will see that a lot of these young trees are growing crooked, and some of them have remnants of gauze and tape, duct tape, quack, quack, wrapped around them to keep the deer from chewing on them. So they're growing crooked. Look at that. Poor tree. I think I planted that one about 5 years ago. Started off as a little bitty thing, and it's growing nice now. Let me show you one that I'm particularly proud of. This one. This tree, which is also growing crooked. Another ponderosa pine. It started off as a little bitty thing. Let me come over here for a second. It's about a little bit smaller than this one here. Here's my foot for a reference. A little bitty tree. Itty bitty thing. And I planted it right there. And the deer munched on it, proceeded to nibble and almost girdle the tree or gird the tree or whatever it's called, and almost killed it. So I wrapped it up with some duct tape. Quack, quack. And it survived and it grew. And I don't know, I might have been about 14, 15 years old when I planted it, and look at it now. Woohoo, so tall. Who would have thought it would grow so nicely? So, that's enough for now. I'm going to knock it off, jump into this car, which I bought from my son and grandson, or son-in-law, daughter, and grandson. Drive it back to Portland. See, the kid is supposed to be getting his driver's license. And I'm training him because, I'm also a CDL teacher, driving teacher. I got too many dang jobs. I'm anthropology professor, yada, yada, yada. Talk too much. Me, I. That's enough. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being so patient with me. It's 15 minutes and 8 seconds of yakety yak from your professor. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.